bring a summary of the kind of the state of the city. And this year, we're going to look at some Excelsior basic facts. I'd like to spend a little time on the financial state of our city. And then talk about the 2011-2012, the accomplishments and the goals that the council has set forth. And then a little bit about just what's going on. To know Excelsior is to really understand some of the, what I would call the detail of our statistics. Because within the 55331 Excelsior zip code, there are many more thousands of people than really the city of Excelsior. The city is really only about 2,200 people. The 2010 census was 2188, but the updated Met Council assumptions and estimates put us at 2203. That's with our current occupancy statistics. Our land area is actually 554.5 acres, which is actually 0.86 of a square mile. So it is less than a square mile. And that square mile consists of a lot of different land types. But if you look at our residential land at about 1/3 of the city, 33%, our commercial land at 7%, that means the rest of the land, the other portions, which include parks, schools, churches, the right-of-way, the light rail or the rail right-of-way, Highway 7, the cemetery, our parks, all of that equates to about 60% of the land. So in a sense, we have 40% of our land taxable and 60% non-taxable. Our housing also is unique for a city out in the South Lake area because we have 1,254 housing units. 36% of those are single family. There's 13% which are townhouse to a fourplex. And then 51% of our housing stock is actually multifamily, which would be the larger condominium and the which is 52 units, and then we have many apartments. So our housing stock is very broad in terms of its type and heavily weighted, more than most communities, towards the multifamily end. The city staffing, as for 2,200 people and for less than a square mile, we have right now 8 full-time staff, and then we employ some seasonal staff, 1, 2, or 3, depending upon the year, to help out with summer work and care of the parks. We have a city manager form of government, and so the city manager manages our city. We have a finance officer, a clerk, a planner, public works superintendent, and then sewer, water, streets, and park personnel, which one of each in each of those areas, and of course then our seasonal folks. The city manager also works then and makes sure that we have adequate coverage with our planning. In particular, our commercial is a planning consultant that we hire. We have an engineer, WSB happens to be our city engineer, and then we have our legal consultant, Kevin Stone. We have our public safety, which in both the police and the fire, we have joint powers agreements. And our joint powers for our police is the South Lake Minnetonka Police Department. We share that with Greenwood, Shorewood, and Tonka Bay. There are 16 full-time staff, including 10 patrol officers and 2 detectives. They handle an incredible amount of calls every year, somewhere in the range of 6,000 ICRs, both criminal as well as what are grouped as other ICRs, anything from medical calls to helping people with unlocked cars for their keys. They write 4,500 citations a year. That's traffic, warnings, parking tickets, and so on. If you think about those kinds of, that level of activity over 365 days, it's a lot of work for our police department. Our fire district is another joint powers, and it's called the Excelsior Fire District, and this is in combination with 4 other cities: Deep Haven, Greenwood, Shorewood, and Tonka Bay. We have 2 stations, one, the main station, if you will, which is a joint facility with the police on County Road 19 in Shorewood, and then we have another facility that is located in Deep Haven. This is a volunteer fire department, and we have around 46 members. That varies from year to year, and they make about 750 calls a year. So this, being a volunteer department, is of a tremendous value to the city. There's another joint powers that we have, which is, but we share the services, and again with the South Shore Center. The community center is owned by Deep Haven, Excelsior, Greenwood, Shorewood, and Tonka Bay. Now this group of cities has a management agreement right now with Shorewood. And so Shorewood is actually managing the senior programs and the meeting and the event space. And then another shared service that we have is the Lake Minnetonka Communications Commission. And this is a 17-city consortium that oversees our cable franchise agreement. So the city works in conjunction with many other cities to not only manage the communications, but also the South Shore seniors and our joint powers. So we really do collaborate and coordinate our services with a much broader area than simply the city of Excelsior. I'd like to transition into the financial, because that has been a topic of great concern over the last few years in particular. People have talked about whether or not the city of Excelsior is in a great financial shape. There have been concerns raised by a few citizens regarding reporting requirements and those kinds of things. But I want to assure the citizens of Excelsior, the business people of Excelsior, that the city of Excelsior's financial condition is in very healthy shape. 2 years ago, we asked to get a bond rating because of the pending street project, and we were going to need some bonding dollars in order to do that. So we went and got a bond rating from Moody's, and they ended up looking at the city of Excelsior and said that they would give us an AA3 bond rating because of stable financial operations with healthy reserves, manageable debt levels, strong management and leadership, and a small, but noted in that we do have a small tax base and population. So in a way, they were setting us up in a very good, strong, healthy bond rating for a small city, but acknowledging that we do have limits somewhere down the road. Over the last few years, as this recession has hit in the community, almost every city, actually I believe every city, has watched property values go down. The value of Excelsior real estate is no different. However, Excelsior has gone down at a lesser rate than other places. And so if you look at the valuation from 2011 and 2012, we changed our valuation of about a -3.7. This was comprised of residential lakeshore that went down about 2%, off-lake residential that went down 5.4%, apartments which stayed about even, and not about, stayed even, and then the commercial land, we have very little industrial, very commercial land, which actually increased at 4.8%. So our commercial, which is very different from other commercial areas in cities that have seen a decrease in the commercial industrial numbers, we have actually seen an increase. That has, of course, allowed us to lessen the percentage change in the drop of market valuation. Well, that is one area. The other area that we look at is the tax capacity. And this rate, tax capacity rate, that we have is a rate given to a classification of property times the value allows us to get our tax capacity. Well, our tax capacity has actually gone down a little bit, and thus the distribution of the tax levy for the properties has changed a little bit. Our tax rate at 35.3 in 2011 stayed a little bit, very much the same, just a little increase in 2012 because our tax rate, our tax capacity went down just a little bit. So our rate went up. If you look at neighboring cities and around our immediate area, you take a look at Chanhassen that has about a 28.5% tax rate, Deep Haven at 17.8, Greenwood, Minnetonka is at 35.5, a very similar tax rate to ours. Shorewood and Tonka Bay, you can see the comparison. Excelsior, with its being as small as it is, and yet having the amount of services that we have, and particularly our policing and the park costs that we have for maintenance, drives our tax rate up a little bit. But if you look at other metro cities and smaller cities in the metro area, Osseo, St. Anthony, and Maple Plain, for example, those tax rates are in the 64 to 66 range. So as you look around the cities, the different cities, the value of living in the small city of Excelsior is still here. And I think that really needs to be driven home. That even though we have a small city and we have a lot of services, our tax rate for a small city, a full service small city, is very reasonable. Now, what does it take to run an operation like the city of Excelsior? About $3.43 million a year. That's comprised of the general fund of $1,805,000, and then a series of other categories of expenses that include our special funds and our enterprise funds. So if you look at the rest of these, the parking lot, water, sewer, solid waste, street lighting, docks, surface water, all are components as far as what expenses we have as a city. The debt service fund is a new fund that it's been around, but we are accounting for it differently this year because of changes in the reporting standards that we have as a city. If you add that $100,000, we come up at $3.43 million. The general fund part of that is what we are normally talking about on a day-to-day. The general fund gets funded through our tax levy. Our debt fund gets funded through our tax levy. The other funds have other revenues associated with them. Our sewer has a charge for fees. Our water has a charge for fees. On your bill, on your quarterly bill, you'll see charges for street lighting, charges for surface water, charges for the garbage collection, and the sewer and water. Those are the enterprise funds, and so those are accounted for in a separate account. But the general fund of the $1,805,000 consists of these categories here: the general government, public safety, public works, parks, our miscellaneous, and our transfers out to capital funds. You can see by far that public safety is our single largest expense. Public safety is fire, police, and our building inspections. Those public safety, that public safety grouping, if you will, accounts for over 45% of our budget in our general fund. On the revenue side, if you look at what we charge in terms of taxes, okay, you have our property tax levy, which is essentially what we need to charge to run the services that we have after we look at our other revenue sources. Those revenue sources of franchise fees, licenses and permit, intergovernmental revenues, service charges, fines and forfeits, The rents from our 3 properties, or 2 properties that we have, but 3 tenants, the library, the people who are in our the old fire station here, as well as the old police station, those rents come to the city. Our interest earnings transfer in and miscellaneous. When you take those revenues and deduct it from our expenses, we have a gap left. And that's what we levy, our property tax levy. And that this year was $1,217,339 plus the $100,000 for our street. So what does that mean? It means that in 2012, because we flatlined the budget from last year, our total levy was $1,317,339. Now what's important to note here is that over the past 9 years, we used to have this line item. If you look back at the intergovernmental revenue, that line item was over $240,000 that we used to get from the state in the form of local government aid and market value homestead credit. That is now only $68.95. If you come back to this chart and you think about the $1,317,000, we would only be levying, if we had that money, we'd only be levying about $1,077,000. So our loss of local government aid has had to be made up with our levy. I just want to commend this council and previous councils that have had to grapple with this transition of having to figure out how to hone a budget and how to manage our tax increase and our tax rate. If we had that $240,000, our tax rate would be about 26%. It would be well within the hunt. So our issue here is that over the last several years, with the loss of local government aid, we have been able to still maintain a reasonable tax rate for a small full-service city and hone this budget to provide services for our community. I think it's, again, I want to commend this council and the previous councils that have really tackled this, this issue. One of the historical aspects of the council has been its attention to the policy of fund balances. If you remember the Moody's rating for our bond rating, one of their key issues for rating us as high as they did was we had stable and strong fund balances. Well, our 2012 fund balances, estimated fund balances, are again very strong. There is more detail. You'll notice up on the upper right-hand corner here, there's some reference to some pages in our audit. And I think that anybody that wants to follow this presentation, that wants to go to the website, this information, this presentation, along with our 2012 budget and our audit will be posted together so that you'll be able to get more detail if you would like. Our fund categories for the fund balances, these are our, quote, reserves. Our general fund balance is $1,562,000, which equates to 62% of our operating budget for the 2012. Now our council policy is set at between 40 and 50%. We like to hover at least at 50%. And the Sherry, help me. The state auditor, thank you. The state auditor gives us a range for cities of 35 to 50%. We have been hovering much more closely to the 50%. Our fund balance is worked up to 62%. And so we have a very good fund balance, but we need a good fund balance because of cash flow requirements and also because of the types of projects that the city is contemplating in the future. As we look at our long-range plan, we have other capital needs that we will be executing, and we're going to need strong fund balances. Our capital improvement fund at $1,082,000 is strong, and then you can look at the park improvement our street improvements, our other funds. And then the enterprise funds, which relate back to the sewer and water and the others, have assets that the net assets are $1,777,000. That provides us with fund balance of $4,774,000. It's $74,000. Again, a very strong fund balance. One might ask, okay, that's fine. How do you pay your debt? What outstanding debt do you have? Well, at the end of 2011, the city had outstanding debt of revenue bonds, improvement bonds. Those are the street bonds. The revenue bonds that we had were part of the sewer and water, earlier sewer and water bonds. We have post-employment benefits, and then we have compensated absences. So we have outstanding debt, longer-term debt of $3,653,000. However, those two bond funds have planned revenue to offset them over the course of the next several years, in the way of special assessments as well as tax levies that will go to pay for those street improvements. So before I just jump off, let me just make a summary statement again. We have a staff at the city that has taken this financial accounting and the financial reporting very, very seriously. There was a change in accounting standards that were implemented this last year. We are at the end of those. We have almost all of our information now, and our presentation is getting clearer and clearer. And the City Council is dedicated to making it simpler and more clear so that the general public can understand the information. So we're rearranging our information from the audits and from our budgets and from all of the different reporting sources. We're compiling those and trying to make a very clear and simple presentation so that it can be understood by the general public. This council is dedicated to that, and I understand that in the next reporting we are putting a policy together that will outline what documentation will be available, and we will have some examples on our website in the very near future. So in 2011, we really I almost would consider 2011 to be a staging or a setting up of what is happening in the last part of 2011 and what is happening now in 2012. We reviewed and revised some ordinances that started to allow for a microbrewery or two, and some shared parking that we've been able to achieve. We commissioned an Excelsior Renaissance study, commonly known as the Sandell Marketing Study. We initiated the 3rd Street Safety Study. We initiated the Commons Bandshell Feasibility Study. We did complete a water distribution capacity study, which is being utilized now this year for input into the Met Council force main project. We constructed additional residential docks, which has improved revenues for this year. And then completed the library design advisory task force activity, which was set up when the library submitted its plan and the design was not accepted by the general public, and we went back to the well. We've gone through a process with the library, and they are now submitting their project for review by our commissions, and that will have a much higher chance of success now that that has done. I want to compliment the Hennepin County for their willingness and to walk back through a process and to make this a better library, not only for the library board itself or the library group, but for the city of Excelsior. In 2012, we met again. We meet each year, the council, and we look forward 1, 2, maybe 3 years, depending upon how aggressive we get. And we had goals that we established, and there are 2 sets of priorities. The first priority was to really begin assessing our amenities and use policies for the commons. This has been an ongoing topic of discussion. It's tied in with the Excelsior Renaissance study look at terms of how do we take our events and we maximize those events. And so this assessment will start taking a greater front seat here over the course of the next 2 to 3 months. In addition to that, we have, I believe that we're also going to need to take a look, seriously look at the accessibility of the commons and the park issues with making our facilities fully accessible for the disabled. We are in the process of the 3rd Street Fire Lane. That was a goal that was established actually last year. It's on the list, and we're working through a process and a project that will, defining that project in more detail now. So we're going to make the end of 3rd Street much safer and more environmentally sound. We'll continue to assess the parking recommendations, and we'll be looking at some angled parking in agreement with the school district. We're looking at additional revenues for capital projects that are regionally significant. That is meaning the commons and some things there. It's in the form of a possible food and beverage tax. And then we will be looking at maximizing our tax capacity, utilizing our city-owned facilities. Thus, this property here, the front part of the east parking lot, and again, the police old police building. And how can we use those? Can we use those? How do we work City Hall within those functions? Are they for sale? Are they for leasing? How do we maximize our tax capacity and our revenues for the city? On the second priority, we're looking at some of our policies of tax increment financing. We're looking at St. Albans Bay Bridge, which has currently a safety rating that is declining, and at some point that will need to be replaced. We may look at a pedestrian bridge from the extension of Cortland. We need to finalize our assessment policy, and then look at to see once we have some of these development proposals through whether we can find a place for a town square or a promenade or something like that that will bring focus and energy to our downtown. Speaking of energy to the downtown, that is what is happening right now. What's happening is amazing. The brewery is open today. The certificate of occupancy was granted, and I stopped over there at 4:30. I didn't drink any beer, but there were 150 people that were. So good for them. The Excelsior Brewing is brewing. The Excelsior Elementary site development, the school district is making a safer entrance and drop-off area for the school, the elementary school, and in addition there's a parking area. They're in the process of developing that right now. The Mason property, grocery and retail, that is in the process of being negotiated. The approvals have been granted on that, and we hope to see some activity there very soon. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the Hennepin County Library proposal is coming through our commissions. The 470 building, Old Red Owl building, we're going to be reviewing that tonight. It's through the Planning Commission. A hotel proposal, we're going to be reviewing. The Planning Commission has sent that to the council. We'll be reviewing that on the 16th of July. So that's another project that is looking to get approval here. And then the 3rd Street, as we talked about, the 3rd Street Safety Lookout Project that will have will continue on. And then the Met Council Force Main Planning. You've heard us, if you've watched these council meetings in the past, you've heard us talk a little bit over the last 2 to 3 years about their work that is going to extend from Beerley, George, through the school district property, Morris Avenue to Excelsior Boulevard. And that will be a force main that will take project that will go over a 2-year period that is going to improve the Met Council the sewage force mains, and bottom line, we're going to be able to reap the benefits of the Met Council project by having some of our streets and utilities paid for through the Met Council funding. So that's going to be of great benefit to Excelsior. So all in all, it's just amazing what the city is experiencing right now. We are excited with the energy, the activity, the investment in our downtown, and the housing and the building permits and the remodeling that are occurring continues to remain strong. And we are very, very lucky and fortunate here in Excelsior to be a great destination where people want to live and work and play. So I thank you very much.